Well, thank you everybody for coming along this evening. I'm not going to repeat everything we've put in the newsletter and Instagram and Facebook, but just to give Kat's talk a little introduction. Kat has been running the admin that goes on behind the scenes for Blue Monkey for the last 10 years, which primarily results in giving us the amazing newsletter from which many of us, including me, have found out about many relevant opportunities, often resulting in new connections. This last year, she has most definitely stepped out of her comfort zone and been in the hot seat, fronting and organising our events programme. Before withdrawing to the sanctuary of her studio at the end of this year, we're delighted that Kat has agreed to share with us her reflections on how we make connections, narrating a journey steeped in research, philosophy, and general meanderings inspired by our year of running the network. So I'm going to hand over to Kat for her talk, Only Connect. Thank you.
I've tried to work out how to start speaking so many times, and I wish I'd started writing it about 6 months ago, because I might feel less tortured appearing in front of you now. Those of you who endured my previous presentations will be familiar with my habit of starting with disclaimers, that I'm not a writer, I don't know enough about the material, and that I'm not presenting a theory, just a collection of stuff that somehow connects for me. A thought trail in progress presented from my own perceptual tunnel. And the vast majority of that stuff, what follows, consists of things other people have said, made, done, because that is how it works. And I'm just another mind processing material and turning it into something else. The images come and go as a kind of parallel oblique collage. There are the running themes, the frame, the somewhat theoretical bits that don't come with illustrations. Some stand for all the bits left out, not explaining, but evoking, alluding, leading, switching. Quotes which entered into the dialogue, my work, other people's work, maybe a great cartoon or diagram, because there's a whole other thing about combined words and images that I just can't seem to do myself, except adjacently in the titles. They're not labelled and they're not going to be formally introduced, but feel free to ask at the end. No interruptions, please, as I'll just fall apart. The mind and the body, you know. And if you haven't already muted yourself, I would be most beholden to you for the consideration. I wondered if I should preface showing a tweet with a defence, as I know it's a bit unorthodox, and many people have their own firm ideas and feelings about online spaces and the value and quality of what can be found there. But we all haunt different libraries and groups like these, collecting and circulating. Our commonplace books just look a little different these days. And the process of dialogue extending and expanding the flow of ideas is not irrelevant, as it all has something to do with connection, communication, multiplicity of meaning, and not letting ideas about things or unexamined frameworks get in the way. Everything that contributes to the work is valid, and this is only the conscious stuff. And it is my own predilection that if the thing that set me off on a train of thought was something overheard on the bus or some poorly remembered comment one of you made, then I will necessarily have to state that debt and provenance. Plus, once you start getting obsessed or possessed by an idea or territory, then everything you come across seems to be connected to it, which is no mystery, because it is indeed a two-way street, a conversation, a circuit, or a feedback loop. I'm ready to write a new chapter of my book, research all done, but can't begin because I don't have the first line. Once I have this, even if it ends up changing, then the rest will follow. Anyone else find they need that first line to give them permission to start writing? Having such trouble getting started, I incorporated this into the substance for a number of reasons. The idea of using a line about the first line is thematically appealing, given the thinking about thinking, looping, nested tangle of connections and tangents. It relates to something we've talked about sometimes, not too often because our feelings about it are problematic and isolating, and that's the block. When we're stuck in a trough, lost our bearings, and in danger of questioning the whole enterprise. As one of the open plan residents said to me, I wasn't sure if I was even still an artist, because sometimes life gets in the way in an overtly very serious, all-encompassing manner, or impenetrable unconscious factors prevent you from getting into the zone, the headspace of operating well artistically. You've lost the map, so you have to fall back on your instincts and use trial and error to find your way back to the path. Try again, fail better. Beckett's Just Keep Going is not oriented toward any sunlit upland. It connects deeply to the lost through empathy, cutting past that feeling of you don't get it. He did. The self-censor gets in the way too, the unhelpful interlocutor on your shoulder, asking if it's any good, where exactly is it going, what's it about, what do you think you're doing? We talked about rules-based practice and this interesting process of creating according to self-imposed limits, be it format, material, a manifesto, or a one work a day for 30 days type challenge proposed by someone else. Sometimes it helps that it's not your own idea. That too can be liberating. And it sounds paradoxical that limits can make you free, but that too is just a framework aberration that can get in the way. And one of my guiding, admittedly basic precepts has become pragmatism over ideology, that your intuition, I will always hesitate to say knowledge here, it seems too fixed and final, based on observation and reflection of what works in practice, is a better field guide than any inherited sociocultural theory or norm of what should for everyone. As that great observer Montaigne, who paid attention to everything, said, use little tricks. Sometimes you need a workaround to fool yourself, disrupt the self-censor, and allow yourself to set out and off. So the permission to start made me chuckle self-consciously, because I'm keenly aware that my habit of beginning with disclaimers is my little trick on myself. But I can only begin speaking once I've made it abundantly clear that I know nothing at all and don't pretend to speak for anyone else. It's taken 2 pages already, and I'm sure some of you are desperately wondering, when will she get to the point? Well, I have bad news for you about that, but the good news is this has all been relevant, a laying out of the territory reminiscent in its being haunted by the possibility of a one-to-one mapping of form to content, words to meaning, of Lawrence Sterne's fictional diary of Tristram Shandy, so detailed that it takes the author 1 year to set down the events of a single day, often cited as the most extreme literary example of a concept which runs through this whole thing. Alfred Korzybski's remark that the map is not the territory, that is, the word is not the thing, that many people do confuse maps with territories, that is, confuse conceptual models of reality with reality itself. It sounds kind of weird to say that the mind and the body are connected. It feels like an evident truth, but the structure implies already there are 2 distinct things, like us and our environment, somehow linked, touching, intertwining, acting on each other in a mysterious way. Where is the line? Trying to locate it is like zooming in on a fractal coastline, closer and closer, and you see the replicating pattern, distinguish between land and sea, but you will not find a gap. Difference is not separateness. The map is not the territory, but the way we talk about things is everything, the entire culture. We shape it and it shapes us in a fluid, becoming feedback loop. And the real contradiction is fixed terms and frameworks for fluid, intertwined nature. We experience it as one, and yet every 5 minutes there's a new article explaining some new connection between the 2, and we're intrigued. Where does the mind end and the rest of the world begin? Thus begins Andy Clark and David Chalmers' 1998 paper on extended mind theory, presenting the idea of active externalism, in which objects within the environment function as a part of the mind. They argue that the separation between the mind, the body, and the environment is an unprincipled distinction. Because external objects, such as notebooks and devices, play a significant role in aiding cognitive processes, the mind and the environment act as a coupled system that can be seen as a complete cognitive system of its own. We are constitutionally poised to extend with the world. Extended mind describes something that is already happening. We already think outside and beyond the brain. Thinking happens out here in the world. Consider how we use our bodies to think and learn, how we use our tools, spaces and environments, and our social interactions, relationships with people. And then consider the opposite of extended mind, the brain-bound mode, thinking sealed within the skull, in splendid isolation from others and the environment, and how common that notion is in our culture, society, and education. Historian Miranda Anderson says that cognition was not always understood in this neurocentric way, and argues that people living in the 16th and 17th centuries were actually more apt to understand cognition as distributed than we are. The early modern period inherited and developed concepts of the mind from classical antiquity and medieval traditions that accorded a cognitive role to the body and the world. Furthermore, it underwent transformative sociocultural, scientific and technological shifts, which led to a heightened awareness of, and at times anxiety about, the distributed nature of the mind. During this period, gestures, spoken, written and printed language, clothes and other objects, living things, particularly other people, and practices and institutions were understood as diversely expressing, enabling and constitutive of human minds. Though the term originates in our own period, distributed cognition was more widely manifest in the 16th and early 17th century early modern belief system than it has become in current times. So what happened? In 1637, René Descartes woke up in a fluster. The fact that we dream and hallucinate meant for him that our senses are not always trustworthy. Maybe we don't experience the real true world. Maybe it's all a simulation. In his quest to demonstrate the attainability of certain knowledge, he settled on the one thing he could be absolutely sure of. I think, therefore I am. Through absolutely bulldozing our confidence in the existence of anything but our thoughts, Descartes inadvertently created two separate realms, the mental and the physical. The mental we can be sure exists, however deceived or deluded that existence may be. The physical world needs to somehow be linked to it. Simple solutions to complex problems are very seductive. We can't really blame Descartes, though. He was free to write whatever he liked. The real conundrum is why we Westerners have allowed this completely counterintuitive position to become dominant in the culture. I came back to extended mind after observing in our rehearsals this year that some people avoid preparing or using notes in case the spontaneity suffers. One person made a very interesting remark after rehearsal, that they'd worried having notes and rehearsing might mean it was less the real me, but that actually it had been more. The association of spontaneity with authenticity is a funny one for us, considering how much time we put into making the work. And I think very much rooted in that forgetting or reappraisal of the distributed nature of cognition. Once you've divided the mind from the rest of the world, anything that might affect your performance, such as what you ate, what the person before you said, or whether you got out of the wrong side of bed this morning, requires some sort of spooky action at a distance to explain why on earth it should make a difference. And yet, is that not life? And in terms of our actual sense of self, is it I think, therefore I am? Or rather more, I feel, therefore I am? The continuous flow of interoception, perceiving the internal state of the body, grounds us in the sense of being ourselves and no other. Distributed cognition is open-minded and pragmatic. There have always been moral panics about whether we use devices or memory aids too much. What about if we use them too little? By using calendars, maps, and asking other people to remind us of things, we free up space for more interesting thoughts. Some of us use notes to self to encourage or to de-stress our overwhelmed minds. Some use mind maps, and I really need to learn about those. We don't have these worries about books, so many minds circulating, and Montaigne, the keen observer who freely entertained doubt, really expressed the dynamic to and fro of extended mind when he wrote, "I have no more made my book than my book has made me." What's really emerged for me, I suppose, from trying to formulate this talk is the multiple levels of frameworks and registers we operate in as individuals and as a culture, as artists, as well as people who have to write instructions. I experience a certain clunkiness attempting to switch modes. Making work, I expand and allow the big picture, the whole territory, to circulate freely. And if I get into the zone, the sense of self, the disconnect, recedes. Trying to correctly transmit information, though, I encounter a whole barrage of my own assumptions and biases. At the end of last year, I put out my very carefully worded proposal for coordinating a make or break year of events, setting out the situation, possibilities, time limits, shortcomings, hoping I had covered every angle in language that would mean the same to everybody and put it in a place where all of you would read it. At the time, I was incredibly frustrated that for all the talk of us being so connected these days, actually reaching everyone, even at this scale, is hard. This one doesn't read emails, that one's not on Facebook. No, I stopped reading because I was too depressed by the thought of the network closing. And let's not get on to the, so you're in charge now, because I thought that was so clearly defined. From here now, in the more open space where I knowingly chose a title which evokes multiple references, whether the Forster quote, only connect the passion with the prose, or just come and meet some artists, or a series of randomly connected clues, I see that it's not that people don't listen, or I didn't put it in the right place. It's my bizarre underlying belief that if I'd used exactly the right words, everyone would have got precisely what I meant. A one-to-one mapping of form to content, word to meaning, framework to reference. And it relates to the difficulty we are experiencing in the communication of ecological crises, or indeed the pandemic, because there is an assumption that simple presentation of the facts will land uniformly and equally in common sense, i.e. rational consciousness. And that's just not how it works. We often use the phrase, well, you know what people are like, and we don't mean uniformly, immensely logical. One of my favorite model to experience disconnect remarks is St. Augustine's observation that if you don't ask me what time is, I know exactly what it is. But when you ask me, I haven't the faintest idea. Time is a useful construct, and people who are habitually late love to mix it up and say time's not real. As I slowly realized while putting this together that everything seemed to have something to do with semiotics, which I hadn't the faintest idea about, I was amazed to find that Augustine was the first to define a signum or a sign as anything perceived which makes something besides itself come into awareness. Signs, symbols, words, images, the map is not the territory, and most of this could have been alluded to much more succinctly. Just a trace here of something left out because it got too long, can't keep everything in, but just look at that block. In pristine condition despite being over 750 years old. Each block of the Tripitaka Koreana was made of birch wood from the southern islands of Korea, treated to prevent the decay of the wood, soaked in seawater for 3 years, then cut, boiled in salt water, placed in the shade and exposed to the wind for 3 years, at which point they were finally ready to be carved, then covered in a poisonous lacquer to keep insects away and framed with metal to prevent warping. The wood blocks would form a pile 2.74 kilometers high if stacked, measure 60 kilometers long when lined up, and weigh 280 tons in total, perhaps the most successful large data transfer over time yet achieved by humankind. 52 million characters of information transmitted over nearly 8 centuries with zero data loss. Transmission of data to generations of a very specific audience, the Buddhists in this case, whilst a tremendous achievement of craft and dedication, is as nothing compared to the challenge posed by one of the many conundrums we have brought upon ourselves. The documentary Into Eternity is about the nuclear waste deep storage facility at Onkalo, Finland. The engineering required, the depth and the geology, and the amount of time the waste must be stored undisturbed, 100,000 years, with no contact at all with soil, air, or any living being or system, are all truly mind-boggling. And there was a very interesting considered conversation going on about whether the site should be marked somehow to try to warn future generations to stay away. It sounds obvious you should try to warn someone of a hazard, like danger of death on a pylon. We are used to the elaborately signalled landscape in our daily lives, but we are also used to the complex diversity of humans, and a sign may be clear in intent, but not deter infallibly. We know the names of so many psychological biases, it's a wonder there's a notion of a norm, the not actually so common sense. We know that many people vastly over or underestimate their own abilities, and though in some cases they may have correctly assessed that the risk is low and imagine a potentially high reward, the essential is that they have comprehended the magnitude of the consequence, which in this case is truly devastating. For context, the inner shrine of Tutankhamun's tomb was left intact for little more than 3,000 years before it was dug up. A message has to survive, be found, and be understood. It also has to be believed. That's the hardest part, said one worker at the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico, which aims at a mere 10,000 years untouched, as it's not storing spent fuel rods, but gloves, tools, and so on. When you look at the suggestions from the 1984 Department of Environment's research group into long-term comprehensibility, the nature of the problem unfolds, and you start to understand why those at Onkelo may favour not marking the site at all. Proposals included a landscape of thorns, blocks, a black slab which would get unbearably hot under the desert sun, though what can be known of the climate 10,000 years hence, even that Munch's The Scream should somehow be reproduced throughout the area, in the bizarre supposition that it universally and eternally transmits a message of danger. One group proposed that domestic cats be genetically engineered to change colour in the presence of dangerous levels of radiation. In 2014, musician Emperor X wrote a song called "Don't Change Colour, Kitty," designed to be so catchy and annoying that it might be handed down from generation to generation over a span of 10,000 years. The one that lodged itself in my mind was semiotician Thomas Sivyok's Communication Measures to Bridge 10 Millennia, which has been described as something of a cult classic because of the enduring dramatic language. After an explanation of semiotics, communication, the ever-changing nature of language and human customs, Sivyok basically proposes forming a religion. The existential risk to be communicated by means of a folkloric relay involving artificially created myth, something along the lines of "this ground is cursed," the theory being that this type of folklore is transmitted better over larger temporal distance than scientific facts. The legend and ritual as now envisaged would be tantamount to laying a false trail, meaning that the uninitiated will be steered away from the hazardous site for reasons other than the scientific knowledge of the possibility of radiation and its implications. Essentially, the reason would be accumulated superstition to shun a certain area permanently. The actual truth would be entrusted exclusively to what we might call, for dramatic emphasis, an atomic priesthood. That is, a commission of knowledgeable physicists, experts in radiation sickness, anthropologists, linguists, psychologists, semioticians, and whatever additional expertise may be called for now and in the future. Membership in this priesthood would be self-selective over time. An elite group in control of meaning trying to tell people what to do sounds like an eerily familiar recipe for failure, but I've long been taken by the view that everything is stories, and every time a new mention of the drama-inflected atomic priesthood comes up, I think, see, the relay works already in the culture. Rather than new words for environment, we need better stories to live by, as many have said, to change the narrative in a way that fully embraces the complexity of the whole ecosystem. It's not enough to say everything's connected, if that's become a thought-terminating cliche like "it is what it is," or indeed if it's subject to the illusion of explanatory depth, that common human thing where if we use or interact with something a lot, we think we know all about it, a zip or a fridge being common examples. But if you have to explain in detail exactly how it works, then most of us are soon stumped. Sebiot was one half of the duo that coined the term Umwelt, which can be thought of as the world as it is experienced by a particular organism, uniting all the semiotic processes of an organism into a whole. Internally, an organism is the sum of its parts operating in functional circles, and to survive, all the parts must work cooperatively, the collective Umwelt, which models the organism as a centralized system from the cellular level upward. Whilst the semiosphere is formulated as physical phenomena, specifically energetic and material signs which can be detected and transmitted as signals from one individual to another, it is the Umwelten of living organisms which give those signals meaning. I include this to preface Gregory Bateson's work. I only came to it recently and find it inspiring and intriguing, but it's too dense for me to explain. So I merely quote, paraphrase, and hint at what has connected this all for me for the moment. Bateson's ideas hit a strange blind spot in Western thinking. On the one hand, we have a scientific approach to the study of life that takes for granted that natural laws exhaustively explain all of reality. On the other hand, we have a humanistic approach to which human intentionality, conscience, or first-person experiences remain central, and which maintains that the core of these phenomena evades description in terms of natural laws. A third possibility exists, a position that sees human mind as a particular instantiation of a nature that is in itself, in a deep sense, minded. A view, in other words, which holds that neither human mind nor nature at large is reducible to deterministic natural laws. Bateson, writing in the 1970s, was talking about the urgent need for a whole new way of thinking, now dubbed biosemiotics, also called relative being. In Nature and Difference, he proceeds from the map is not the territory. What is it in the territory that gets onto the map? What gets onto the map, in fact, is difference, be it a difference in altitude, a difference in vegetation, a difference in population structure, difference in surface, or whatever. In the hard sciences, effects are, in general, caused by rather concrete conditions or events, impacts, forces, and so forth. But when you enter the world of communication, organization, etc., you leave behind that whole world in which effects are brought about by forces and impacts and energy exchange. You enter a world in which effects, and I am not sure one should still use the same word, are brought about by differences. That is, they are brought about by the sort of thing that gets onto the map from the territory. This is difference. What we mean by information, the elementary unit of information, is a difference which makes a difference. Bateson's core idea was that living systems are communicative systems by themselves. They draw patterns, and connected to what Peirce said, that thought operates on signs. This difference is radical. Concepts refer, signs signify. Signs are neither sensible things nor concepts. They are pure relations. As soon as we accept the reality of sign processes, we also immediately see the deep significance of Bateson's lifelong attempt to determine the pattern that connects nature and culture. Semiosis is constitutive to both of these realms. Evolution and thinking are made up of the same stuff, and the name for this stuff is relative being. Bateson was emphatic. It is the attempt to separate intellect from emotion that is monstrous, and I suggest that it is equally monstrous and dangerous to attempt to separate the external mind from the internal, or to separate mind from body. Pascal asserted that the heart has its reasons of which the reason knows nothing. We need not be put off by the fact that the reasonings of the heart or of the hypothalamus are accompanied by sensations of joy or grief. These computations are concerned with matters which are vital to mammals, namely matters of relationship, by which I mean love, hate, respect, dependency, spectatorship, performance, dominance, and so on. These are central to the life of any mammal, and I see no objection to calling these computations thought, though certainly the units of relational computation are different from the units which we use to compute about isolable things. But there are bridges between the one sort of thought and the other, and it seems to me that the artists and poets are specifically concerned with these bridges. It is not that art is the expression of the unconscious, but rather that it is concerned with the relation between the levels of mental process, the pattern that connects. During an online talk about artists working with scientists, this Mark Taylor quote came up. Perhaps only an artist can save us now. And June was there too, and quite rightly said, that's a big responsibility, which indeed it is, if you expect an individual somehow to make the difference which turns the whole thing around. After Bateson, I think we can reframe it as artists, poets, philosophers, polymaths, and systems thinkers of all sorts, moving between disciplines, working on realizing a whole culture shift. There's a lot of work already circulating at every level. We need everyone to keep going in the understanding that it is not down to one person or one genius idea, no magic key. Among ourselves, humans like to play the 6 degrees of separation game, and it might be good to think of everything that way. Sarah Gillespie's mezzotints document the disappearing moths, and we have just saved the California condor by extincting the condor louse. So someone's just lost their lunch. So it goes, patches upon patches. As Thomas Moynihan says, we are a very young species compared to the ants, who became a social species millions of years before humans evolved. Sometimes described as a superorganism, each ant is a speck of intelligence, combining into an astonishingly coordinated whole, having apparently solved many of the conundrums facing complex societies ages ago, with nothing more than their anciently evolved infallible instincts. We have everything we need if we don't let faulty frameworks get in the way. We are an inexperienced species. This means our brand of brains remains unproven, even unstable, but this confers all the plastic potentials of youth. Our world remains young, but we need to buy ourselves time. Bateson's advice? Never vote for a man who is neither a poet, nor an artist, nor a bird watcher. Some time ago, I posted this little poem in one of my occasional clippings dumps. Like a magpie, I collect the shiny things that catch my eye and then arrange them together like a poor human equivalent of a bowerbird. One of my very analytic, sciencey friends responded, "What does it mean?" The sort of question I feel I can't answer in a single sentence. Where do you start or end? But the only satisfactory response I could find, my instinctive reply was eventually to myself, I don't ask what does it mean, but what does it do? And actually anyway, as artists, we tend not to say what the work means, but what it's about. I realize that for some people, answering a question with another question is not their idea of a satisfactory response. In this great conversation with Jeremy Miller for the RCA, Writing for Whom, the Publics of Curating, Ralph Rugoff, another one who studied semiotics, said some pertinent things which resonated. If you're working well, a lot is happening unconsciously, and you don't really know what it's about till after. Duchamp referred to the artistic coefficient. The artist only knows about 50% of what their work is about. They think it's about the intention, but they only have half the story. Once the work is in the public domain, it's up to us to read it. And one critic posited that once it's out there, it's 100% the audience. The artist's intention is irrelevant. Thinking is hard. On our own, we can't hold on to a thought for very long. But in dialogue, we can do it for much longer. The dialogue of writing it, then reading it, responding, reading again, exactly Montaigne's point. It is dialogic experience which helps you think, and that's what's happening when we work, with whatever material or practice, dialogue at all levels, all the way down. We like to think that words all mean the same to everybody, but no, there's a general consensus, but different perceptual tunnels. As a curator, he aims to convey that it's one person talking, not a voice from on high. It's a proposition, not stating facts. And that's what an exhibition should do. Look at a particular perspective, make an argument. And the key responsibility is trying to make your audience realize that they are part of the conversation. They're not being invited to just admire the genius of these artists and accept whatever the curator says it means. But all that you bring to it is part of what it means, because there is no final meaning. That's the nature of art. It's radically open-ended. In an article about their film Cows and Flies, following the installation Every Cow is a Map of the World, Jack Hogan talks about the time spent in Mexico with the Zapatistas as marking a radical shift in their outlook, and specifically their refusal to split mind and body. For Hogan, art is different lenses more so than a mirror, and Hogan's favourite art moves me by making me feel like a person entwined with other people, places, plants, animals, fungi, microbes. Cows and Flies explores what it means to be with each other, to participate in a more than human community. I would get up at dawn when the 8 cows were in a huddle, snoozing, and we did performances and photo shoots together. I made masks because I read cows don't like direct eye contact. I appreciated their seeming indifference to my difference. In Bateson's language, we could say that Jack successfully made their being human a difference that didn't make a difference by intelligently directing the performers under the life-size print of an aerial view of the cows themselves in the field, moving slowly and without too much purpose, nothing sudden or noisy, not making eye contact at the right time of day, and so on. An approximation to an understanding of the cow's map of the world, if you will, coupled again with the understanding that the map is not the territory, which features throughout the classic, through the classic references from the work of Lewis Carroll, Borges, and others. And at the centre, Jack's own words multiply and dissolve across the screen like a shimmering phenomenological manifesto. To entangle, to rumple up together full of folds, to give body to many selves each, to putting ourselves together every day, to what to keep complexity, to not identify, to being beyond category, to illegibility, to the impossibility of fully grasping another's perspective, to accepting what we don't understand, to making ends meet, to renewing our habits of assembly, to the sensual conditions of that renewal, to those that cannot be named, to things that cannot be seen, to complicate and be slippery. The evolution of the writing or any artistic process is such that once you're involved en route, you're on a path of nested realizations, the making so and the perceiving what it's about. When I'm making a piece of work, though, I have a much better intuition of whether it's working and, crucially, when it's done. Realizing that really the heart of all this opened up a new territory for me, semiotics, I also saw I must treat this talking as a piece of work, that I will just have to decide when it's done, and that is not the same as complete, confirmed transmission, message received, no caveats, no noise. And done may only be when time's up, because now Annie Ernaux's Nobel acceptance speech has crept in as a better formulation of something else. The prerequisite of sensation has for me become both the guide and guarantee of the authenticity of my research. But to what end? Not to tell the story of my life, nor to free myself of its secrets, but to decipher a lived situation, an event, a romantic relationship, and thereby reveal something that only writing can bring into being, and perhaps pass on to the consciousness and memories of others. Nearly there. Switching mode, making a new map, heading for my bunker. This year, as temporary coordinator with Nikki, I've had to communicate predominantly in that arrangements, information, instruction mode, where trying to arrive on the same page involves a tortuous negotiation with my own notions of clarity, intent, and the widely differing responses, angles, and approaches. Totally different, presenting you with a piece that you can either look at or not, respond with something that hadn't even occurred to me, and that's fine. Not knowing, not controlling, opening up and beginning something. a real dialogue, even when totally silent, hybrid, fluid, uncertain, not pinned down. I'm off with my pile of post-its to dive into the conversation with material, playing with Tetra Pak printmaking, our undoing, fixation, edges, textures, details. I can't depict Bateson's vision any more than I could make an architectural diagram of Peake's Gormenghast. You can hear the echoes, no doubt, of how all this folds back into things I've said before. The zone, the ancient instincts, and the uncanny, the interplay of control, not control, and the misnomer of happy accidents. Us shaping our buildings, and then shaping us. It all proceeds, engaging metaphorically, inquisitively, the black and the white, the this and that, the infinity of tones in between, and to connect differently again with you here, not having a job to do. It started off being about X and Y and all your events and our interconnections and my consciousness of my own shortcomings and inability to read maps. But as is the way, before you know it, you're down a rabbit hole. So from cows and flies, from the hunting of the snark, and in response to various letters asking for the meaning of the poem, Carroll often replied that he did not know. However, in an 1896 reply to one letter, he agreed with one interpretation of the poem as an allegory for the search for happiness. One last sense, a nonsense map and rhyme. He had bought a large map representing the sea, without the least vestige of land, and the crew were much pleased when they found it to be a map they could all understand. What's the good of Mercator's, North Poles and Equators, tropic zones and meridian lines? So the bellman would cry, and the crew would reply, they are merely conventional signs. Other maps are such shapes with their islands and capes, but we've got our brave captain to thank. So the crew would protest that he's bought us the best, a perfect and absolute blank. C'est fini.
Thank you. If you could all unmute yourselves, that would be wonderful.
Oh, it's finished.
Oh.
Thank you. Wow, that was just amazing, Kat. Just giving us all those differences in connections, communications, and no matter how we do it, we all connect differently and we respond differently, and that's why we all create differently, which is what brings us all together, really. Okay, have we got any, can anybody manage a question after that?
I just wanted to say thank you to Kat for doing all that reading and thinking so that I didn't have to.
I'd love to say it was a pleasure, Kath, but as you know, it was quite tortured.
No wonder you've been in Purda for a month. Oh.
I did consider leaving the country at one point just to get out of it, but you know.
I think it's when Kat did her uncanny talk, I think some years ago, it was, you sort of you're left wanting more and wanting to go off and research more and think about some other things that you've either not heard of or whatever. But yeah.
I think actually
I've got a question, Kat, and that is, I was fascinated by that Korean document.
Oh yeah,
a beautiful thing. Can you tell us a bit? I put in the thing, I've spelt Buddha wrong, but I put in the questions. What were they actually recording with that fabulous document?
It's a massive sort of scripture, if you like. It's kind of their kind of whole, you know, like a sort of ancient Bible, I guess, but completely, because it's Buddhist. I expect someone else probably knows more about it than me. I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's that thing where you're passing down something which is already a kind of very set text for the, you know, the already Buddhist followers. So it's like, it's an amazing thing, and the blocks look incredible. And there was this whole bit as well where in the 60s, apparently the president thought he'd have this brilliant idea where he'd construct this brand new state-of-the-art concrete facility. And so they transported a couple of blocks just to test the waters. And they started developing mold. So it was just like, no, okay, no, abandon.
Yeah.
Because obviously the buildings were constructed with just as much care as the blocks. And, you know, it was all sort of, you know, limestone, clay, etc. And so the humidity would come and go, and then the arrangement of the windows being perfect orientation and size and everything, you know.
That whole thing about the process of both printmaking and something like ceramics that's so long-winded to get to the end result, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
I really like the as someone who's kind of new to this and really kind of connected to songs more than art in many ways in the past. What interested me was how similar it is when you talk about what things mean to people talking about what songs mean and what lyrics mean. And, you know, the endless talk about what Bob Dylan meant by blah, 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 or whatever. And of course, everybody thinks something completely different. They're all right. They're all valid. And he may have thought, the songwriter may have thought that, or may not have thought that, or never occurred to them, just wrote it, you know, who knows. But it's a very similar creative process, and that's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's that thing of it, like, you think of all the, you know, I mean, Shakespeare's probably a more recent one than some of the things you can think of. That whole thing of the sort of folkloric relay of enduring stories, and they get reinterpreted and refashioned, but you know, this is how we got where we are.
Yeah.
I know I think Judith just disappeared, but Judith had a question about I think you're muted at the moment, but was it the string pieces that you were particularly asking about?
I don't know if they were string, actually. There was 2 images, weren't there, with kind of
frameworks. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Those are the Marshall Islands stick charts. So they're the sailors, and there's 3 different types of them. Some of them refer to the currents and the swells. Some of them have the actual islands marked on them. And then there's another one that I can't remember, but they're such fantastic kind of, as an example of, you know, the map not being the territory, but it is exactly what is needed. It's the relevant information with absolutely nothing else. It's just the differences that make a difference, and they're so beautiful. Someone obviously photographed them really nicely. Like that, they reminded me a bit of, you know, Victor's photos of the cardboard boxes, just with that lovely black and white.
Yeah, I did wonder if they might be something to do with Victor, actually. So yes, and yeah, I thought they looked a bit like sort of straws or something, you know, that kind of I don't know, kids game where you can put straws together. Thank you. I'll look them up.
Excellent.
Has anybody else got any other questions?
I've got a remark. It's not a question.
No, that's much better, Judy. Don't ask any questions.
Okay, well, I mean, I just think this is so complex intellectually, but the fact is you make visual art out of it, which is a kind of astonishing connection, really.
Well, it's kind of, it's that weird thing, isn't it? Like, you sort of make it out of those things, but it's kind of speaking without having to put it all in a line like you do in a talk, you know, where it's all got to come out, because when it's an artwork, it's all there all at once, and all the bits that don't go in and all the rest of it, and then the whole thing of the audience doing most of the work. And so
that Winnicott quote that you started with, reminded me of, I think it was that one, reminded me of like my definition of painting used to be a performance that you don't have to appear in. And I kind of now I think about, I mean, it is connected with that, you know, does everybody look at something and see something similar or interpret something similarly? So I had a friend who would write a poem or do a piece of art and got absolutely outraged if people didn't understand what it was. And I'm like, well, it's a piece of art, you know, what do you expect, kind of thing? All you can do is put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's also that thing, isn't there, when you're exhibiting, in that, do you just put the title, which can be a giveaway anyway, or something about where you're coming from, but beyond that, if you have to put any description or not. And I know when I've been in things, some people always want to put a description, and I never want to put a description.
Yeah.
Because do you want to influence, or do you want the person to see what they think you're communicating? I think it's so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I really like that comment from Ralph Rugov saying, you know, the ideal wall label would just be a series of questions. And I thought, yeah, that could, I could go with that.
Yeah, well, I was at Tate Modern recently, and it reminded me how incredibly crap their wall captions are.
Oh,
they always are.
And
kind of, it's so disappointing, because I think you could be making this much more interesting, actually. So I hope nobody works for the Tate making captions for the artwork.
I think, as Kat implied actually in her talk, you know, the caption that goes with the work can be part of the work, really, can't it? In that, you know, your title is part of the work, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, so sometimes so is your list of media. And, you know, anything that you put on that label that goes with the work can actually be part of the work, can't it?
Yeah, I see it very much as, you know, they're kind of operating as a whole thing, you know, work, title, label, frame, whatever. They're all sort of operating, and none of them is sitting there going, and now I'm going to explain exactly what it means, because that would just ruin the whole thing for everybody. And, you know, it's kind of, it's not going to change the fact that everyone's still going to read it their own way, but it might kind of slightly spoil it.
It's all just another part of the clue, isn't it? And you can either take it or leave it, really.
Yeah, I like the idea that the title adds a kind of a layer of potential sort of ambiguity. It's sort of something extra that adds to the complexity and multiplicity of interpretation.
Yeah. No, I usually, I was going to say I take quite a long time over my titles, but I don't mean that I'm kind of sitting there scratching my head trying to think what's a good title. It's normally while I'm making something, and I'm always kind of, you know, jotting down various bits. And there's usually some point where I just sort of scribble something down, and then I look at it again and I think, maybe that's it. You know, it's kind of, it's there in the whole sort of process of the doing, and you're thinking about this and that, and then something just sort of emerges that you go, oh yes, no, I quite like that. And, you know, it comes back.
I think that's really important, actually, Kat, that what you're thinking about while you're working, and you're just engrossed and involved in the process. I think that's really important. If you've got to try and scratch your head for a title at the end, you might be better to say Opus 3.
Yes, exactly. The classic untitled or whatever. If it really hasn't appeared.
Yeah, for me, because I quite often put titles on things, and I hope it's not like in a boring program music. It's more just about, it's about sorting out what I'm trying to do while I'm doing it, and those things help direct the work that I'm working on. Actually, I think.
Can I say something here? Because I was thinking about Howard Hodgkin, who always named his work, after he'd done something. So, for example, if he did a piece of work and it looked like there was something like some red shorts falling down in the corner of the picture, he'd call it, red shorts falling down. And it does depend on your mind and how active your mind is, or how your mind is when you're working. And so, I think in a way I fall into the latter category, which is to sort of name something afterwards. But I like, you know, the fact that you sort of looked, Kat, about the kind of vagaries and the whole notion of, you know, wondering if you're an artist and wondering about the central nervous system. You know, you've brought so many different things in to think about. It's so complicated. I mean, in a way, it's quite a lot to listen to, and I need to read the transcript to kind of inwardly digest so much information that's going on there, and how you then pinpoint something. And then, for example, you would then do a piece of art with Tetra Paks or something like that, that are probably symptomatic of how we package stuff these days, the kind of outer covering that is opened out. You know, the symbolism actually of that kind of occurred to me, really, the ironing out of packaging that is everyday and someone's made a fortune out of it, you know. And
and I sort of, because the Tetra Pak, I mean, I like experimental printing anyway on various bits and pieces, but with the Tetra Pak as well, it was like that, really that thing of it being these kind of, you know, bonded materials that, you know, you can't pull them apart for the recycling. And so it's sort of, as well as just being an interesting surface to mess about with and a way of reusing things, it was also really that kind of, you know, related to the sort of undoing piece with the sellotape and string and stuff, to see if I could get it to kind of fall apart. I think it might take a bit of doing. I might have to attack it with something quite heavily, I think. But it in a way, sort of referencing that kind of duality slightly, you know, kind of pulling things apart and putting them back together again, sticking them together.
I've been reading a Chinese American author recently, and he does translations of Chinese stories. But there's one point where he was talking about the meaning of a particular piece of text, and he was saying that there was a meaning that was associated with what it was when it was said, but there was another meaning that was only there when you saw it as the written text.
Interesting.
So he talked about the idea that they often had multiplicity of meaning in it. So that kind of layering, that, you know, not only is the map not the territory, there isn't even a single map.
Yeah.
Subtext.
I mean, also talking about the layperson or any person coming into view art on the wall and the being flummoxed. And I was reading Belle Tilley's book, and this whole notion of how you sort of talk to people to bring them on board with you and explain, rather than feeling the difficulty of saying to somebody, well, just try and think about something in terms of a pattern, you know, if it is so terribly difficult for you to want to know. That whole sort of patience and time and trouble to reach out to somebody who, you know, is feeling very much out of it, you know, how much effort we make to reach out and educate people that not even halfway there.
Hello.
Hello. Who's saying hello?
Me, it's Anne.
Hello.
Hi. Can I ask a technical question?
Yeah.
Have you tried etching? I mean, like acid etching on the Tetra Pak?
I don't do acid etching, because when I do etching, I use copper sulfate. So I'm not sure it's going to do anything. And the thing is that it's all got this kind of thin plasticky layer.
Yes. Yes.
And to actually get that off, you can't, it's actually quite hard to, you know, peel it off. It doesn't just kind of pull off or anything. It's really seriously bonded into it. It's quite a weird, I mean, when you rip it, you get quite a good sort of cardboardy bit. So that really takes on the black ink, you know, but actually getting the plastic edge to come away from the foil takes quite some doing. It only comes up a little bit. So I'm kind of, I thought I'll approach it a bit like the undoing. I will just keep using the same plate and rubbing away at it. That's why I've sort of started off just kind of cutting holes in it, so that every time I rub it and ink it and all the rest of it, because I'll wipe it like an etching, maybe slowly it'll start to kind of tease apart a bit and then start to move a bit. But I think it's going to take, but mind you, with the undoing with the sellotape, for about the first 10, it hardly moved at all. So, you know, it was a kind of momentum sort of built at some point, that once a little edge has managed to come up and keep rubbing, and then it kind of, the ink gets under there, I think, and starts shoving it around.
Yeah.
Gaynor's got her hand up.
I can imagine, sorry, I just wanted to I can imagine Sheila Hay might have something to say about that. You like to play around with things, don't you, Sheila?
I do, but I've got a different sort of comment, because Kat, you just gave a performance there, and it's a bit left field, but in the no theatre, the ideal to create spontaneity and authenticity, although they might not call it that, is to be overtrained and under-rehearsed.
Yes.
And I wondered whether that resonated with what you've just done.
There is because obviously I had to read it through a few times, because otherwise I just couldn't have coped with it. But at the same time, I was aware that after about 3 times probably, I thought, no, it's just starting to annoy me now. And also I woke up this morning thinking of more things to add to it, and I thought, well, that is the danger. But very much when I was writing it, and I thought, you know, that whole thing with people, the spontaneity thing, I thought, you know, when you see Mike Leigh talk about how they do his films, and like people who do improv do masses of prep, absolutely masses, in order to be able to, you know, interact in their genuine character or whatever it is. So it's not scripted, but there's tons of preparation.
Well, we could all feel that. Fantastic.
Thank you. And I did think as well, because when I was talking about that, and I thought the one, because Gaynor is here tonight, and because we had a very marvellous event that some of you came to when we went to the stereoscopic show, and our preparation for that basically was to keep saying to each other, it doesn't matter if you're not feeling up to it on the night. It was very much a preparation of, it will not be the end of the world. Everyone will be very happy to see the show. And I think that allowed all of us, you know, Gaynor, myself and Adam, it was just like, look, we're just going to be ready. We'll have some drinks, we'll have some stuff, people will come. But that's absolutely fine, because it was just kind of making it, you know, and sometimes that's your way of preparing it. Just kind of go, look, it's absolutely fine.
I mean, if I may say, yeah, I mean, that was an amazing experience for me, actually, that of course you underplayed it so much. It made me, you know, it just made me not worry about it at all. It was really great. As you know, I told you how you helped me manage it in that way. So much. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, I think it was like, you know, the point was, it's only if you would enjoy it and if you felt that it would be, you know, a valuable thing to do, and that was the point of it, wasn't it, to share it.
Like for example, you said to me, look, you know, if you don't feel like showing up on the night at all, it's fine, you know, it doesn't matter, we'll just see what's there. And, you know, that gave me the courage to show up, actually, you know.
Yes, and then you brought lots of lovely things and told us loads of brilliant stories, and it was fantastic. Everybody absolutely loved it.
It was very special to me. Kat, can I just change the subject and just say that what was interesting that I hadn't thought so much before about was when you were saying about the communicating with humans, you know, over this 100,000 years, whatever, because of the nuclear waste example.
Yes.
How much actually art helps us connect over the millennia, doesn't it, in a way? Well,
yeah.
I was at the British Museum the other day, and we just had an hour to kill or something. So we went just up, we made a mistake. We thought the Persian collection, the Persian exhibition that's coming up was already on. It wasn't yet on. So we just went up to the Persian collection, and some of it was so ancient, and it just, somehow you could just connect to, through the art, it helped you understand their lives and how they operated, of course. And of course, a lot of it was practical stuff like utensils and stuff.
Yeah.
It was really moving, and you felt connected. With the art was a fantastic medium to connect, isn't it? Because it's often the only thing that's left sometimes in some of those ancient communities.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing, that, you know, because some of these people, they'd kind of gone, oh, you could, you know, put some instructions on a website or whatever, like completely not thinking like, well, you know, 100,000 years into the future, there's not going to be websites, and, you know, none of the, you know, the ancient languages, the unreadable ones now, what is it, linear A or whatever, that nobody understands anymore. So it's like the relay that really works is the visual or song, or, you know, even if the words aren't comprehensible, sometimes the meaning of the dance or whatever comes through.
Does it kind of consciously get to you carrying all this stuff about in your head? I mean, I hadn't thought about whether I was walking on a bunch of nuclear waste before, but I'm kind of going to worry me now. Nobody's figured out a way to signpost it. It's just like, oh, well, it probably won't matter.
It is, I mean, it's a really good documentary, actually, Into Eternity, and it's there on YouTube. You can just watch it, and it's so considered. They're being so careful, and I mean, it's so far below this bedrock, which is, you know, they've specifically chosen, there's no volcanoes, nothing like that, you know, they are being as careful as possible, but you don't know what's going to be happening that far into the future. Just got no idea. And yeah, they may not think it's as exciting as Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody knows.
Where did those images come from, Kat, that you showed alongside that?
Oh, the ones of there's a site which talks about the whole project. I will try and find it, but it's all about that whole commission of like getting people's ideas. I can't remember what it's called now. It's somewhere in my notes. But yeah, they've got all of them there. They didn't have a picture of the potential radioactive cats, unfortunately.
No, I was glad for that, for Judy's sake, actually, that we weren't going to be showing that.
I just thought cats always cop it, don't they? It's always cats, right?
Yeah. Well, I think they can, you know, we can assume that cats will probably still be popular. You know, they seem to be pretty enduring in the art.
Well, they were with Tutankhamun, so yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
Exactly.
Cats will go on when the internet fails.
Yeah.
Why you're called what you are, Cat.
Yeah, but the cats mightn't remember what humans were.
Wow. Yeah.
They won't need to.
Well,
they won't care.
I suspect they'll deal with the radioactive material better than we're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
They push it off the table.
Bury it in the garden.
I think I just really want to say what probably a whole load of people are thinking, which is what an incredible expanse of different things that you just pulled together and brought together, intellectual questions and thinking and philosophies, and you just You just cherry pick them and bring them together. And I'm in awestruck at your ability to do that. And thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Clive. That's very kind of you. I did have many panics that it only made sense to me.
No, it didn't make any sense. Come on.
Oh, well, that's good. That's fine then.
My favourite visual was all the post-it notes. I thought, oh my God, how to keep track of all that?
They just kept piling up, Judy. It was terrible. There were just billions of them. It's like, you know, because you sort of try and get away from it, and then you think, oh, I'll just write this sentence down. And then before you know it, you've got this massive blooming pile of sentences, which is not very helpful.
Well, I squirrel away little bits of paper with quotes on them all over the bloody house, and then sometimes they don't re-emerge for about 10 years. You know?
Yeah.
Who said that? And where was it? And all of that.
I know, because I used to religiously stick them into my little sort of studio workbook or whatever. But then once you've got about 10 of those, it's like, which one is it in? I don't know. I have no sort of indexing. But then again, you know, maybe that's just part of the exciting flow of things, that then you come across them and you completely forget you ever had it. And you're just like, oh, look at it, that's amazing.
There was someone on Instagram I saw this week who's selling framed post-it notes of some, and usually just one word actually, Kat, not a whole blurb, but you know, and that's the work. And I think maybe that is the work.
Blimey. Oh, that's good. Maybe I could sell my "It's not a tiger" post-it.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, if I have any more questions before we kind of close off, it's like 20 to 8, so we've got loads of time, but feels like we've kind of, I think you've exhausted everybody. Everybody's like going, wow, you've got so much to think about.
That's absolutely fine. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it, and we've recorded it, and then if anybody wants I don't know, references or anything, you know, you can always, you know where to find me, you know. It's like, it's
in the bunker.
In the bunker. I will still have my email. I might not answer it quite as often as usual, but you know.
Go back to you should publish it as a pamphlet.
Oh my God.
Even if you don't post it on YouTube or offer as a TED talk.
To Rachel for her next exhibition on pamphlets. You'll be there.
Oh yeah, no, I wish I'd made it to the pamphlet. I love the pictures, look great. So is there going to be another pamphlet exhibition? You're muted. Where are you?
Hang on, I need to unmute you.
She turned off her camera.
Oh, she's disappeared.
That's it. Well,
hang on a minute. Where's my video gone?
Sorry, everyone. You're back. You've got your voice and your visual now. Wonderful.
It would be such a good pamphlet, Kat. It would be such a good pamphlet. I'm a fan of the pamphlet because it kind of, you know, it's like it commits, doesn't it? Yeah. It commits. I think there will be another pamphlet. I definitely think that.
Excellent. Good.
So you're gonna have to like get your long arm stapler out.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, I like a bit of stationery. I'm sure I can find one of those. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for coming along this evening. I think we had a really good turnout. I think it was better that it was online, personally.
Well, I think
we might not all have kept quiet enough.
No, I think it worked really well. Kat and I said that this week. It was a good one to convert quickly to online, so that worked really well. So thank you everybody. Just a quick plug to say that if anybody needs to renew their membership, please do so. And also anybody who's already a member, if you haven't got your work on our website yet, that Sue has pulled together, and it's just so amazing. We'd love to see your work on there. If you need any help, then email one of us and we'll give you a hand. If you need some help with artist statements, then maybe we will run a little workshop or something about that. And obviously we're moving into a different year, into January, and I think I'm very pleased to say it's going to be run by lots more people, and that will be great. We've got a great team together, and hopefully from today, I think we've got the next 3 events are on the website, and we will try and do that a rolling 3 months of what the events look like, they will be, as long as we don't have any other disasters. But yeah, so just keep a look at the website. That's really going to be our main place for sharing everything, keeping everybody up to date, as well as a little bit of Instagram and a little bit of Facebook. And Kat is still going to be sending out the emails once a month, so thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all. Have a delightful festive season, whatever you do with it. Splendid solstice.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Kat, do you want to just say chat? I don't know if you have to do that before you go, because there's
what do I
quite a
have
lot
to do
that you might want to read to save the chat.
I think it saves it anyway. I think with the recording I found, because one time I wasn't sure if it was happening and then it was there in the little folder, so I'm just assuming it is there.
Okay, good. Just so you get a chance to have a read.
Thank
Wonderful.
you, darling.
Well done. Yeah, you're done. Party starts now.
Well, I think lying on the sofa with a vodka starts now.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best starting point, to be honest. But yeah, that's really good. It's a really nice turnout and really, yeah, it went really smoothly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Good. Oh,
excellent.
Good.
All right, lovely. Well, I will no doubt be in touch. Yes, because there'll be, you know, mail out things to do at some point.
I'm going to start bombarding you now. I was keeping it back. I was like, no, I'm going to wait until she's like, let her talk.
You've been very good. I'm sure there are a whole lot of things that we need to sort of scribble down or whatever. But yeah,
no, that's good.
Whatever. Now that's done, it's like
well done, really good.
Freer brain.
And you're okay sending out a transcript or whatever. So we'll get it onto the YouTube thing, and then we'll share it on the website, and then
yes. I'll stick it on the YouTube. So the transcript, do they mean the actual, you know, the script as it were?
I think they do, because I think it's like you're sort of like listening and trying to write an odd note, and then you look back and you've missed a bit. So it's probably
fair enough.
If you're happy with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, we could stick that on the website because that doesn't take up much space, does it?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Super.
Good. Have a good night. And
you,
I'll be in touch from next week. I'll give you a weekend off.
Okay, lovely.
Okay, take care. See you. Bye.